What is up, everybody? Welcome to the main event deep dive for UFC 264. And we have a great fight to talk about. Conor McGregor going against Dustin Poirier, the trilogy. It's 1-1 going into the third fight, and cannot wait to break it down. I'm here with my Uncle Weezy, and excited to get into it. Before we get started, if you guys can leave a like on the video, also subscribe to the channel if you have not yet, so you not miss out on the content throughout the week. Going to be doing a co-main event deep dive as well. Gilbert Burns versus Stephen Thompson with Uncle Weezy as well. And then the full card breakdown and prediction video will be out, thinking either Sunday or Monday. So look forward to that. So I'll kick it to Uncle Weezy. Uncle Weezy, are you looking forward to this matchup, man?
How could you not? I mean, it's Conor McGregor. I mean, this is the guy. If you don't get fired up for Conor McGregor fights, it's time to stop watching MMA, get to curling or whatever the hell else you got to watch, because this is for all the fans. This is not just for the hardcore fans. When you get a guy like McGregor with the kind of international appeal that he has, it's hard not to get fired up for his fights. He gets the crowd going. He's got a unique personality. He's got that unique power and that way that he moves in the cage. He's inimitable. And Dustin Poirier, you talk about a guy who's got 25 UFC fights. He's seen it all. He's tough as hell, and we've seen it all in the tape. This is such a great matchup. The trilogy, it's 1-1, like you said. I am really, really fired up for this fight. And even though I've watched the tape and even though I've went through the numbers, I honestly still don't know who I'm picking. But it's going to be really great. I think after you and I really kind of get into all the aspects of this fight, you and I will have probably a much better idea of which way we're going to go at the end of this. But we got to really get into the numbers here. And I think hopefully this will help everybody out that watches us, because I don't know which way I'm going yet. So I can't wait to get into it.
Yeah, we're going to get into every single aspect of the fight. There's a couple unknowns we'll talk about as well. We'll talk about some betting. Also, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that's going to want to bet on this fight, whether you are on the McGregor side, whether you are on the Poirier side. So, you know what? I say we get into it. Very, very good fight. Like I said, I can't wait to, break it down, and let's start it up. So we have Dustin Poirier. He is 32 years old, 5'9", 72-inch reach, going against Conor McGregor, 32 years old as well, 5'9", 74-inch reach. So Conor is going to have a 2-inch reach advantage. We'll take a look at the last 5 fights between the two. So Dustin Poirier, of course, just knocked out Conor McGregor in that second round, had a decision win over Dan Hooker. It was a very, very good fight, absolute war. He did lose to Khabib by sub, no shame in that. He did beat Max Holloway as well, and then he knocked out Eddie Alvarez. So he is 4-1 in his last 5 fights. As far as Conor McGregor, he just lost to Dustin by knockout, of course. He did knock out Donald Cerrone, lost to Khabib by sub as well. He knocked out Eddie Alvarez, and then he did win a decision over Nate Diaz, 3-2 in his last 5 fights. So we'll kick it to Uncle Weezy. Let's start with the experience.
This is one of the big advantages for Poirier in this fight, is that, while both of these guys are the same age at 32 years old, they're both southpaws, which is super interesting. And you got McGregor with that 2-inch reach advantage. But then when you go into the pro experience numbers, the first thing that jumps out, 300 minutes of cage time for Dustin Poirier, as opposed to 169 and a half minutes for McGregor. But then if you look at the career lengths, you see that Dustin Poirier has a 12-year career length and a 13-year career length for Conor McGregor. So it's clear that Dustin Poirier, over the length of his career, has been the much busier fighter. I always like siding with the busier fighter when everything else is close. You know that person is, more likely to be in shape all the time. They're more likely to be sharp. They're less likely to have some kind of ring rust or adrenaline dump or any of the kind of things that can kind of sabotage a bet. So, and then, when we go down to the UFC experience below that, you see that Poirier's got almost twice as many UFC fights as Conor McGregor. 19-5 record for Poirier, incredibly impressive, and a 10-3 record for Conor McGregor, fighting the top-notch competition as well. But the cage time, this is where we see the big difference. 258 minutes of cage time as opposed to 102 for Conor McGregor. 102 minutes is something that, if you if you go to seven, this you can get that in 7 fights. 7 fights times 15 minutes is 105. So, Conor McGregor, doesn't have the kind of cage time that you usually see out of somebody that is a grizzled veteran with a 13-year career and is somebody that's been dominating in the UFC for as long as he has. So, very interesting experience numbers here. Also we look at the average fight time and we see that, for career length for these guys, 8.82 minutes for Poirier and 6.28 for McGregor, but 7.89 in the UFC and 10.36 for Poirier. So both of these guys, even at the highest level, they're finishing fights. So two special fighters here, but definitely Poirier, the busier fighter with a little more experience, a little bit longer fights, and more fights. So definitely an experience advantage here for Poirier.
Yeah, I'd say there's some advantages to that, and then probably some disadvantages as well. Being in there, a lot, you're going to take some damage. So I do think some damage is definitely more on the Poirier side. But yeah, you mentioned a lot of good things about that. Being more active, less cage rust. So much experience, and that's something that really sticks out. 300 minutes of cage time for Dustin Poirier compared to 169 for McGregor. It's just crazy to see. I think something else that stuck out to me was going to be the average fight time of Conor. Like, he's getting in there and he's getting out only 6 minutes and 28 seconds average fight time. And that's crazy considering he did go 25 minutes with Diaz. So that's what stuck out to me. And 25 UFC fights for Poirier. He's been in the game for a long, long time. But you take a look at the length of the pro career, and Conor has been fighting, 13 years, 3 months ago. Poirier, 12 years. But activity on the Poirier side. Like I said, I do think that it helps, and then it also could hurt you in a way. But I do think that I think it helps you a little bit more. So curious to get in the finish stats here.
Stats, this is something that's going to tell the tale when we look at the over/under, and the fight doesn't go to decision lines for this fight, and it sticks out like a sore thumb. We got an 86% career knockout rate for Conor McGregor. The guy's got vicious power, and we'll see that, when we look at the striking stats as well. Only 5% by sub, so this guy's not exactly a submission artist. And we look at Poirier a little more diverse with 48% overall by knockout and 26% by sub. One of interesting stat that I saw when I rewatched the first matchup between Poirier and McGregor going into that fight way back then, Dustin Poirier was the only guy on the UFC roster to have 2 submission wins by Darce choke. So that was actually pretty interesting. Now that's become a much more popular submission these days. We saw, Tony Ferguson get quite a few of those, and we've seen a bunch of guys get that choke recently. But Poirier was getting that choke back in 2014 and 2013 and 2012. So he's definitely been around the block. He's the more accomplished grappler. We know that Conor McGregor is a knockout artist. And then also, that also shows in the loss by submission. We see that in Conor McGregor's 3 UFC losses, he's been finished in all 3. Twice by sub, once by knockout. The only knockout was obviously by Poirier. And in his career even, 5 career losses, 4 of them by sub, 1 of them by knockout. So Conor McGregor clearly, more of a pure striker, while Dustin Poirier a little bit more of an all-around game, as he has some wrestling, he has some submission wins. And when we see how he loses, in his 5 UFC losses, 2 of them by submission, 2 of them by knockout, both for 40%. And then we look at the overall career. He's 33% by sub, 33% by knockout. So he's been finished, about the same each way. So, probably Poirier is more likely to finish this fight by submission than McGregor is. And they're both knockout artists too. So, both of these guys, very accomplished finishers. Obviously, Conor McGregor, a killer be killed fighter, as it would appear that he has only been to decision twice in his 27 fight career. So when we look at the fight doesn't go to decision line, we're going to see something that's pretty juiced up, and we can see why. It's become very evident in the stats that I just read off to you why the fight doesn't go to decision line, and we'll look at where it is later. But what the spoiler is it's juiced.
Yeah, I mean, around minus 325, minus 310 on FanDuel Sportsbook, it's minus 650 for some reason. So it's safe to say that this fight is more than likely finishing. And yeah, you mentioned it, 91% finish rate for Connor. I believe he has one decision win. Five finish losses for Connor as well, once by knockout and four times by submission. I agree. I think if there's a submission any side in this fight, it is probably going to be the Poirier side. But I think someone's going to be getting knocked out here. But yeah, interesting fight. I do not see it going the distance at all. Honestly, I don't really see it getting past like the fourth round. I don't see it really getting to the fourth round. I think if it's Connor, it's going to be early. I think if Poirier, it's going to be late. We'll talk more about why. But yeah, I think a huge aspect of this fight is going to be the next section we'll get in, and it's going to be the striking statistics, even the grappling. So let's get into those. I think there's something that you really want to point out here.
If you just go and you look at the significant strikes landed and attempted per minute, you see something that's very similar. 5.76 landed out of 11.44 attempted for Poirier, and then you go right across and you see 5.58 landed, 11.37 offered by McGregor. So 50% accuracy for Poirier, 49% accuracy for McGregor, and you say, okay, very close, But then you go down to the next statistics, which are power, and boy, does it pop off the page. Conor McGregor landing a knockout on 2.27% of his significant strikes landed. And if we just do a little bit of math, and we looked at it before we went on, 13 UFC knockdowns in 13 fights for Conor McGregor. That left hand to Conor McGregor is dynamite. And if it lands, anybody that it lands on is going to be in serious trouble. So, while we did see a pretty nice experience advantage and busyness advantage in their career for Poirier, when we get into the striking offense numbers, we see a pronounced power advantage for Conor McGregor over the course of his career. 2.27% knockdowns per significant strikes landed, 1.9 knockdowns per 15 minutes. And then we see Poirier, not pillow fisted in his own right at 0.8% knockdowns per total significant strikes landed and about 0.7 knockdowns per 15 minutes. So, even though Poirier has shown some good power over a 25 fight UFC career, we see that McGregor and the strikes that he's landed is almost three times more likely to land a knockdown. Also, what needs to be mentioned there, though, is that Conor McGregor's fights usually end so early that we haven't seen much of that power from McGregor in the later rounds. That power does come early in the fight, and it is dynamite early in the fight. So that is really where McGregor is the most dangerous, is in those first couple of rounds when he's fresh. And if you move into that left hand of his, you're going to be in trouble. When we look at the defensive numbers, we see also very, very similar defensive numbers. 4.28 landed out of 9.55 offered for Poirier, and 4.76 landed out of 10.5 offered against McGregor. 55% striking defense for Poirier, 54.7 for McGregor. So very, very similar numbers. In terms of how many times they have been knocked down, they're both not chinny at 0.18% knockdowns absorbed per significant strikes landed against, and only 0.2% for McGregor. So 0.15 knockdowns against per 15 minutes for McGregor, only 0.12 for Poirier. Both very, what you wouldn't call either of them chinny at those numbers. If we want to get into that striking differential a little bit more in the ratio, the 5.76 landed against 4.28 absorbed for Poirier is just a little bit better than the 5.58 landed for McGregor and 4.76 absorbed. So we see that, over the aggregate, over their entire careers, Poirier lands just a little bit more and gets landed on just a little bit less. But the biggest thing that jumps off the page on all the striking statistics is obviously the power from McGregor.
Isn't that power number, crazy? 13 knockdowns. Fun fact, Francis Ngannou, the hardest hitter in the UFC, arguably, has only 8 knockdowns. So Connor actually has 13 knockdowns. It's just crazy to put that in perspective. And yeah, you can definitely see it. Like some of these shots that he lands, it looks like it barely touches the guy, and they go down. It's just crazy to think about. And talking about their last fight, Connor hit Dustin clean. More times than I remember. Like he hit him clean. It looked like you hurt him a couple times as well. Just Dustin would not go down. And you mentioned it. He's not shinny at all. He's not shinny. He's been knocked out, I believe, 2 times in his career. But you take a look at his UFC run. And we talked about how many fights the guy has. He's only been knocked down 2 times. 2 times. Connor's only been knocked down once. It was crazy. It was crazy seeing Connor get knocked out for the first time, seeing him get dropped by the first time. For the first time in the last fight. But yeah, that sticks out. That sticks out. The knockdowns for 15 minutes, just about 2. That's just crazy to think about. I think another thing that really stuck out to me, more on the tape side of things is, Dustin gets hit. He gets hit quite a bit. You really don't want to get hit against McGregor. So you take a look at, some of the fights that he was in. Against Dan Hooker, he actually absorbed 155 significant strikes. Poirier did land 153. Against Max Holloway, he absorbed 181 significant strikes. Against Gaethje, 115. So he is getting hit quite a bit. Which is another interesting aspect of the fight is he probably is going to get hit by McGregor. He probably is going to get hit quite a bit. It's just, can Dustin survive until McGregor does slow down? So I think that's very important to note. But yeah, those striking statistics really did stick out to me.
And we look at how much you covered it. I mean, 1,107 strikes Poirier has absorbed in his UFC career, only been knocked down twice. So that's something you really like to see against a power puncher like McGregor. And even better, that this fight is taking place at 155 instead of 145, where Poirier is going to be able to take a punch a little bit better, because he's not going to have to dehydrate himself as much in order to make weight. So, Poirier has been really tough up here at 155, incredibly tough. And he's going to have to be against Conor because of the way that this guy cracks. But, one of the things that we saw in the rematch was Dustin Poirier going to his wrestling. So let's look at the grappling statistics here, because this is going to be important in this trilogy matchup here, because we didn't see Dustin Poirier go to his wrestling in the first one at all, really. And in the second one, we got him getting a couple of takedowns in the first round, getting just a little bit of control time. I mean, McGregor got back up both times, obviously, but he did mix that in. And I think that really helped him get the result the second time around. We look at 25 fights for Poirier, 74 takedown attempts. He's gotten 27 of them, 36.5% takedown percentage. That's respectable. At 1.56 takedowns per 15 minutes is pretty good. 1.04 sub attempts per 15 minutes is solid. And 25% control time is also very good. We look at McGregor, he's actually got a 55% takedown percentage, but he's only attempted 9 takedowns in 13 fights. He's not a wrestler. And then the one famous takedown attempt he had was in the first matchup against Diaz. He got cracked, and then Diaz said, "Oh, all of a sudden you're a wrestler now," and he choked him out immediately. I mean, as soon as he shot for that takedown, Diaz, locked up a guillotine, turned him onto his back, started, ground and pounding him, and he immediately gave Diaz his back. Diaz sunk in that choke. McGregor didn't even try to fight the hands. The only thing he fought for was finding the door in that one, and he got choked out quick. So we do know that if Poirier gets on top of this guy and can hold him down for a while, he's going to have an advantage, and he can work those front chokes. We know he can get that Darce choke. So it's good to see that there is an offensive grappling advantage here for Poirier, even though McGregor has gotten some takedowns when he's tried them. 5 out of 9 is pretty good. If we look at the control time percentages in terms of whether these guys are out controlling their opponents or getting out controlled by their opponents, we see 25% control time for and only 16% against for Poirier. So he's been able to outmuscle and out-control his opponents, while McGregor is at 14% control time for and almost 26% control time against. So he's almost getting controlled twice as much by his opponents for how much he's controlling them. McGregor has shown 67.74% takedown defense. He has successfully defended 21 of 31 UFC takedown attempts against him. Not spectacular, but not bad. Seeing as one of those fights was against Khabib. We see that both of these guys are getting taken down a decent amount. 1.33 takedowns per 15 minutes against for Poirier, and 1.46 takedowns attempt 1.46 takedown attempts against for McGregor. And definitely Poirier's had a lot of submission attempts against him at 1.33 per 15 minutes, while McGregor is at 0.58 against. And we already went over the control time against. So, Poirier better at controlling his opponents than McGregor. McGregor doesn't go to the offensive wrestling as much as Poirier does, although he gets his takedowns at a slightly better clip. Poirier will probably be the more likely guy to try to get takedowns in this fight, and I think he will try to use that wrinkle because it worked in the rematch for him. But McGregor, has shown a pretty good get-up game, and since he's already had to train for somebody like Khabib, just like Poirier has, I don't think he'll be as worried about Poirier's grappling than he was about Khabib's.
Yeah, I thought, their last fight, I thought Poirier came in there with a phenomenal game plan. I mean, it could not have been, perfected more nicely. I mean, he went in there right away, got a takedown, I think with like the first minute, and it looked like it kind of caught Conor off guard. I don't think Conor was expecting, Dustin to go for takedowns, at least that early. And Poirier was able to get him down, but yeah, Conor was able to get back up. But it was just, the fact that he did go for that takedown, and then he also held Conor against the cage for a couple minutes as well. And then Conor was kind of stuck on the cage for a couple minutes, which, that helps a ton. That helps a ton. That's what you want to do. You want to, wear out Conor a little bit. You want to extend the fight, because when you're at range with Conor McGregor, you are in serious, serious danger of potentially getting knocked out. And we saw that in the first round, especially when it was at range. Conor was having a ton of success. I didn't realize it first time watching it live, but going back, Conor was landing some seriously hard shots, some really clean shots on Dustin. Like I said, his chin did hold up, but I thought the game plan of Dustin Poirier was phenomenal. That's exactly what you would want him to do, especially if you did bet him, which he was like plus 275, something like that. But yeah, I think he will definitely try to go there again. I don't see why he wouldn't, because if he doesn't, I do think he'll be in some trouble or potential trouble. So yeah, curious to see the game plan for this. And you got to think that Conor's going to be, more than prepared to, stuff those potential takedowns that are coming, because you better bet that they are coming from Poirier, at least early in the fight. You want to wear down Conor.
Absolutely, and we talked about this briefly before we went on too. Is all these fights, you can't just think that they're going to take place the same way they did the first two times. And these guys are high-level strikers; they're going to make adjustments. Conor made adjustments in his second fight against Nate Diaz. You saw that Poirier made the adjustments in terms of mixing in his wrestling in his second fight against McGregor. And the third fight is going to be no different. Both of these coaches are going to look for new ways to attack their opponents, to surprise them, to get them off their game. But we got to look at the strength of schedule numbers here, because that's also very important. Both of these guys have had, a good long career, and we've got a good amount of data to go off here. So let's look at the ratios overall of the competition. We see both of these guys have been fighting studs. 1.79 win-to-loss ratio for Poirier's competition, and 2.32 win-to-loss ratio for Conor McGregor. And Conor McGregor, even with that 2.32 ratio, we're seeing even more experienced competition that he's fighting, and an average of 18.15 total fights that his opponents have had, compared to 12.16 for Poirier. So even with those big numbers for Poirier, like 1.79 ratio and 12.16 total fights, and a 7.8 and 4.36 average record against, you look at McGregor, and it's even more impressive on the other side with it. The average record that he's faced in all of his 13 UFC fights is 12.7 wins and 5.5 losses. So impressive, fighting top-notch competition. And then if we look at who they're beating, we still see those better numbers over on the McGregor side, where we've got a 1.81 ratio from Poirier and a 2.2 for McGregor, 11.68 total fights for Poirier's competition, 17.6 total fights for McGregor's. So the average record of the guy that Poirier is beating is around 7.5 and 4.1, while the average record of the guy that Conor McGregor is beating has 12 UFC wins and about five and a half UFC losses. So, and then if we look on the losing side, we see we got the advantage that, again, for McGregor, 1.78 ratio for Poirier's losses with 15 total fights, while it's a 2.75 ratio with 20 total fights. Average record 14.67 and 5.33 is the guy that McGregor is losing to. And the average record that the guy that Poirier is losing to has 9.6 wins and 5.4 losses. And if we, just to go a little bit deeper into that, the guys who have beaten Poirier, 13-0 Khabib Nurmagomedov, 11-13 Michael Johnson. Michael Johnson knocked him out in the first round. Fun little fact about that, Michael Johnson's a southpaw, just like Conor McGregor is. And then we see the Conor McGregor, so that was two southpaws in a row that he lost to, 10-3. And then before Conor McGregor, the losses that Poirier had on his record were to a 12-8 Cub Swanson back in 2013 and a 7-3 Korean Zombie back in 2012. And if we look at McGregor, he lost to Poirier 19-5. He lost to Khabib 13-0, and then he lost to Nate Diaz 15-11. The Diaz loss was March 5th, 2016. So clearly, both of these guys are losing to the top-notch competition. They've both lost to Khabib. They've both lost to each other, and then a Nate Diaz loss for Conor McGregor, while you got a Cub Swanson and a what was the other one?
Johnson.
Yeah, and the Korean Zombie too, and Johnson. So, and then they're beating studs too. Here are the names that are on Poirier's resume: Conor McGregor, Dan Hooker, Max Holloway, Eddie Alvarez, Justin Gaethje, Anthony Pettis. Those are his last 6 wins. And then you go behind that, and it's Jim Miller, Bobby Green, Joe Duffy, Yancy Medeiros, Diego Ferreira back in 2015, Akira Corisani, Diego Brandao, Eric Koch back when Eric Koch was a huge prospect, Jonathan Brookins, Max Holloway back in 2012, Pablo Garza. And then, and then you look at McGregor as well, and it's Donald Cerrone, 23-13, Eddie Alvarez, Nate Diaz, Jose Aldo, Chad Mendez, Seaver, Poirier, Brandao, Holloway, and then Marcus Brimage is probably the worst name on both of their resumes, in terms of a win. So, boy, 2 incredibly experienced, top-notch mixed martial artists with a ton of amazing scalps on their records, squaring it off. It might be now time to talk about the technical aspects of this fight, because we could see that we got an experience advantage for Poirier, but we've got that power advantage for McGregor. We got the strength of schedule advantage in terms of the numbers, at least, for McGregor. But they've both fought incredibly impressive schedules, and then maybe a little bit of a grappling advantage for Poirier. So, now we got to start talking about who we think's going to win this damn thing and how.
And that's a hard thing to do, man. I mean, this fight's tough to call. This fight's very tough to call because there's so many aspects of this fight. Like, Poirier came in there with a really, really good game plan in his last fight. I think he caught, Conor off guard. We didn't even mention it yet, but the leg kicks, man, the leg kicks were killer. You could see it, like they were adding up fast. I mean, you could see that, the first couple that landed, it really started to affect Conor. And in that second round, he kept landing more. And then, Conor was done, man. Conor was done. And Poirier was the first one to ever knock out Conor, knock him down. So you got to think, like, Conor is going to be making adjustments. He's going to be making adjustments. He's going to be ready for those leg kicks. He needs to be ready. He needs to be ready, and he needs to be ready for those takedowns as well, especially early. So I'm curious to see, like, what approach, both these guys are going to bring into this fight, because you mentioned it. This is going to be a completely different fight, completely different from the, the second fight, completely different from the first fight. This is going to be a completely different fight. And I guess the most important aspects of this fight, at least to me, is going to be the power of McGregor. We mentioned his crazy power numbers, 13 knockdowns, I think in like 12 or 13 fights, which is just, it's off the charts. It's unheard of. It's off the charts. And then important aspect is going to be the cardio of Poirier. I think that's important as well. Of course, the leg kicks were huge, but like I said, I do think that Conor's going to definitely make some adjustments there. But I do have some serious concerns if this fight does get out of the first round, especially if it gets out of the second round. At that point, I do think that, Poirier definitely takes over. It's just, will it get that far? And that's what makes this fight so tough to call. Will this fight get extended? Will Poirier come in here? Will he be able to take him down? Will he be able to hold him against the cage like he did in the first round? Will he be able to eat those same shots that Conor landed? And that's what makes this fight so tough to call. So I'll kind of get your thoughts of it, but you take a look at the line, and it's a pick 'em. It's a pick 'em. It's a -110 each way, and probably for a good reason. Like, is Conor going to be able to knock out Dustin Poirier within the first round and a half, 2 rounds? Or is Poirier going to be able to survive those 2 rounds, get into the third, and probably, get a finish late in the fight? So curious to hear your thoughts on it. But man, this fight is it's very, very tough to call. I think there's a lot of unknown aspects as well. But yeah, curious to hear your thoughts, man.
The one thing I'd love to know is, what adjustments these guys are planning on making coming into the trilogy fight. And obviously we don't have access to that information, but what I saw in the first fight was when I had watched. I remember prior to the second fight, I was watching Dan Hardy break down the fight, and he's always my favorite guy to go to when I want to see the technical aspects of the fight broken down. And he was talking about Conor's movement. And he was talking about how Conor always wants to bring everybody onto his left hand. And the way that he was doing that back then, he would throw these spinning kicks. He would throw them counterclockwise to get his opponent moving to Conor's left so that he could get him into that left hand. And he would throw these counterclockwise spinning kicks with his own left leg to try to get him into that hand. And that's exactly what he did to Poirier. The first strike he threw against Poirier was that counterclockwise spinning kick, and then he threw that big left hand, and he actually landed it. And then the next time he did that, it was when he put him down with it, and then finished the fight, on the ground with ground and pound with that heavy left hand of his. And the second fight, we see Poirier coming out and wrestling right away. Maybe making Conor's arms fill up with blood, trying to defend the takedowns. Maybe get some energy out of him. And then we saw him kicking that front leg, because one great way in order to take the power out of your opponent's left hand is to kick his front leg, because boxers are usually heavy on their front leg. We saw that in the Villanueva Prachnio fight, where he had a kickboxer against a boxer, and the kickboxer wound up just busting up that front lead leg, which then takes all the power out of the opponent's punches. So, we saw Poirier make that adjustment, go to his wrestling, and then go to the leg kicks. So now we got to wait, and we got to try to predict what the adjustments that Conor's going to make here. But one of the things that's not necessarily technical that has me, kind of leaning Poirier in this instance is, man, I went back and I watched that Gaethje fight, and I watched the fire that those guys were in, and Gaethje kicked the living shit out of Poirier's leg for the first 3 rounds of that fight, and they were landing big shots on each other. And so many fighters that put in that same situation, fighting that kind of war, would have looked for the door to get out of that fight. Neither one of those guys looked for the door. Poirier wound up finishing Gaethje in the 4th, really landing up big shots with his hands. And I don't see Conor having that kind of fire anymore. In terms of, I think, when you make the kind of money Conor just made selling his whiskey company, it's so much harder to get back into the cage and be as hungry as you were back before you had the belt. And he's got so much money now that I don't even know that he needs to be doing this anymore. And when I see Poirier in that recent fight against, and that wasn't too long ago here when he fought Gaethje, and seeing that kind of fire out of him really has me believing that he's going to probably want this more. That fight was back in April 14th of 2018, I haven't seen that kind of fire out of McGregor lately. The second he got in trouble against Poirier showed him the door, and it didn't take long. And even in the Nate Diaz rematch for Conor McGregor, he came out and he made adjustments against Nate. And the first 3 strikes he threw against Nate Diaz were leg kicks. And he said, I'm not going to let this guy box me up like he did in the last fight. And so he made the adjustment with the leg kicks, just like Dustin made the adjustment in the second McGregor fight with the leg kicks. But McGregor looked fantastic for the first 8 minutes of that fight. And then it looked like he got a little bit tired. And McGregor put it on, Diaz put it on McGregor in the second half of that second round. And then the last 3 rounds, man, McGregor just kept looking up at the clock. It didn't look like he wanted to be there. And that was back then. Those Nate Diaz fights were back in 2016. It's 5 years later now, and he's already fought Floyd Mayweather, made a ton of money, sold a whiskey company. Before the Poirier fight, he hadn't fought since January of 2020 against Donald Cerrone, and he was only in the cage for 40 seconds there. Prior to that, his last fight was 2018 against Nurmagomedov, and that was a torture chamber that he was in for 4 rounds in that fight. So, I just don't know. Are we going to see that hungry Conor? Are we going to see that guy that comes out and just starches his opponents in the first round, shows that huge power? And if he does, is he going to fight back from adversity? Because he's probably going to see some adversity from Poirier. Poirier's not the kind of guy that you just get to show the door real quick, like Conor showed him the door the first time they fought. That hasn't happened since Dustin Poirier. And I just think he might be hungrier at this point of his career. I don't have any proof for that, unfortunately. And I don't know what kind of adjustments Conor's going to make or Dustin's going to make for this third bout. But I do see that, I'm leaning Poirier here for the experience advantage, for the grappling advantage, for the possibility that, he will be able to weather the storm because Conor is the most dangerous early in the fight. So I'm kind of leaning like a Poirier, maybe a 3rd or a 4th round finish here. But, obviously I'd be lying if I'd say I'd be surprised that Conor goes out here and got a 1st round knockout, because that left hand of his is absolutely crazy.
Yeah, man. I love the point you made. Something I wanted to ask you, and you were talking about it. It kind of stuck out to me. Is do you think there could have been a little bit of cage rust in that Poirier fight, the last one? Because you mentioned it, he hadn't fought prior till October 6th of 2018 against Khabib, and then January 18th, 2020 against Donald Cerrone. And you mentioned it lasted 40 seconds. So do you think there could have been potential ring rust in that Poirier fight at all?
Look like it in the first. You know what I'm saying? And that's the thing. He looked great in the first. And, and don't forget, Dustin took him down twice. Dustin, in that second bout, right in that first round, he only took him down once. It was only 1 takedown attempt. But he got him down, and he held him down for a little bit. And McGregor got right back up and started working with those hands, which is what he does best. And he landed some big shots. And if he had landed those shots on Poirier at 145, he probably would have went down. So I think that, you could say, yeah, it wouldn't be an illegitimate excuse for if Conor had said, you know what, man, I just didn't feel it. I've only been in the cage once in the last 3 years, and it was for 40 seconds against Cerrone. He didn't have much for me.
Yeah.
Poirier had something for me. Now and it's like, now he knows, okay, look, I'm not going to go out there and starch this guy in the first. So he's going to need to know. He's going to need to be there for 5 rounds if he wants to win this fight. Or, he's going to have to, carry that power into the 2nd or 3rd round. So I don't really think he had cage rust. What I think happened was he did what he does best, which is go out there and land big shots in the first round. But this time Poirier just didn't go away. And then it just didn't wind up working out for him.
Yeah, definitely good points. I don't disagree with anything you're saying, but man, I might go with Conor here. Just the power is something that really, really sticks out to me. Going back and watching that first fight, and Conor did have so much success in that first round, and Poirier just didn't go down. So kind of thinking he catches him here. I think that Connor's going to be, more prepared for the leg kicks. I think the leg kicks are going to be number one priority for Connor. But yeah, with that said, Dustin's so tough. He's so tough. It's not like he's chinny at all. In 25 UFC fights, the dude's been knocked down twice. He's been knocked out twice. So, like I said, I don't disagree with anything you're saying. I think it's one of those things where, if Connor wins, it's going to be in the first round and a half, 2 rounds. I think if Poirier wins, it's going to be, later the fight goes, round 3, 4, or 5. But I think someone's getting finished regardless. It's such a close fight to call. Do you favor, Connor early or Poirier late? I think we both made some really good points, although we're going on different sides. Man, it's a tough fight to call. It's a very tough fight to call. So I do want to see, the odds here for some of the props as well. And it's a pick 'em for a reason. It's a pick 'em for a reason. There's so many unknowns in this fight. What are going to be the adjustments? I think that's the main thing. How is Connor going to adjust, to the leg kicks? That's big for me. You take a look at the under 1.5 is what most books did set it at. The under is plus 145. The over is minus 175. I think a lot of people are going to be on that over. I don't know if I'd touch that personally because of how dangerous Connor is, but taking a look at the fight doesn't go to decision, minus 325. Like I mentioned on FanDuel Sportsbook, it's like minus 650. But either way, I do see this fight finishing one way or another. I'll tell you guys this right now. I'm not going to be betting Conor McGregor. I'm not going to be betting Poirier. This is a straight pass for me from a money line perspective. But I might be looking at the props potentially. But yeah, minus 110. I think if you do like Dustin, I think you can probably wait. I think you can probably wait till the fight week goes on. I think, the more casual bettors will be, placing their money on Conor McGregor. People love betting on Conor. So I think if you do like Dustin, maybe you can wait a little bit. Maybe it does go to plus money. But if you do like McGregor, I'd probably bet him now. It's just, I really have no confidence on either side to lay down a bet, at least from a money line perspective. Weezy, do you feel the same way?
Exactly the same way, and I really agree with everything that you said too. I mean, you're on the McGregor side, I'm on the Poirier side, but we both feel that it's kind of the same way. It's either McGregor early or Poirier late, and plus, if you're on the McGregor side and you think that he can win this fight, and here's what you're hanging your hat on. If you like McGregor, you're hanging the hat on that power and on that left hand, and the fact that Conor is hard to take down. So maybe Dustin tries to go to that takedown early, it doesn't work, and McGregor starts putting it on him. And hell, what was McGregor last time? Minus 300. Now you're getting him for minus 110. Hell, if you're on the McGregor side, you gotta love that. And consequently, if, like you just said, if you're on the Poirier side, you feel like you can wait because shit, you got plus 275 last time on Poirier. Now you got to pay up at minus 110 to get them. The way that I would play this game, DraftKings usually does these parlays where they'll say, all right, so it's a 5-round fight. They'll say you can parlay McGregor in the under 2.5 or McGregor in the over 2.5, and the same thing for Poirier. And the way that I think would be a good way to get some value if you don't really like the minus 110, on either side where you're basically flipping a coin, you could say, well, maybe I could add some value if I go either McGregor by KO or McGregor in under 2.5, where, that's his path. And then I think Poirier's path is kind of wearing him down. And, maybe it's a 2nd round finish, maybe it's a 3rd round finish, maybe it's a 4th or a 5th round finish. If Poirier does wear him down and kind of weathers that early storm, so to speak. So I think that's a way where you can get some value, where if you parlay Poirier in the over, or you parlay, Conor in the under, or the KO bet for either of them would probably be a good way to get some value, especially with Conor, because that's his path to victory for sure.
Yeah, I might wait a little bit and see what the alternative unders are. I think the alternative unders could be decent, especially if you are on the Conor side. Poirier still, I think they have some out right now. So the under 2.5 alternative minus 145, under 3.5 minus 215. I just don't see this fight going that late. I think it's going to be Conor within the first round and a half, 2 rounds. Poirier could even be the 2nd round, round 3, round 4. So might be looking at those alternatives. And yeah, you brought it up, man. Conor McGregor closed around minus 300 in their last fight, and now it's minus 110. Just crazy how things work out. So, yeah, good fight, very good fight. I'm looking forward to it quite a bit. Before we, get out of here, I'm going to kick it to you, Uncle Weezy. Let them know where they can find you and what you have going on throughout the week. I know you have some balls deep breakdowns coming out this week, huh?
Man, I mean, you and we just did this one, and then we're going to do the co-main. But I know the first one that I'm doing this week is Nico Price Pereira. I mean, come on, man, how can you not be excited about that fight? I'm so excited to break down that fight on my channel. You can check me out, Uncle Weezy, on YouTube. And Brady, I got a Twitter, man.
Yes.
I got a Twitter. How do you like that, dude? I'm stepping into the new. You can send tweets there. It's this whole new world. You guys got to find out about it. But you can check me out there at MMA Weezy, with the first M in MMA and the first W in Weezy, the only W in Weezy being capitalized. So you can check me out there on Twitter as well. I'm new to Twitter. Be nice to me, but you can check me out on YouTube as well. I'll be breaking down probably several fights this week, because we got the week off. So I'm not taking the week off. I'm going to be working all weekend, providing some content for you guys so that we can, make the most money possible on this UFC 264 card. I'm so fired up for it, man. I can't wait for this main event.
There you go. Yeah, go follow Weezy on Twitter. That's awesome. We finally got one. I kept asking him about it, but that's good there. So yeah, you can follow me on Twitter as well, DFS_numbers. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be doing a show called Stat Diggers. If you guys have not known about it, it's basically like this, but we're doing it for every single fight. Maybe not as much in depth. It's not going to be a 10-hour show, but it's about 2 hours of a lot of good information. We go fight by fight, digging deep into the stats. It's going to be on Pub Sports Radio Sunday, 7:15 p.m. Eastern time, every Sunday on there. So go check that out. And other than that, my full card breakdown and prediction video will be out either Sunday or Monday. I have half the fights taped already on a Monday, which is nice. Have about half to go. Probably get this out of the way on Tuesday. I do have 2 bets placed so far. None on the main event. Probably going to pass on the main event, other than looking at like an alternative under. But thank you guys so much for watching. We went really into depth. I thought we broke it down very good. And although I'm going with McGregor and Weezy's going with Poirier, it's a tough fight to call. We'll see what happens. But let me know what you guys have in the comments. Are you going with Poirier in the trilogy, or are you going with McGregor? And yeah, that's about it, guys. We'll talk to you soon. And yeah, good luck for UFC 264. Let's make